And he said, well, I'm an actor and I can introduce you to an agency here in the city. So I went to the agency, I auditioned for them, and they started sending me out on acting auditions. And I booked Home Alone 1 and 2. They announced it over the intercom when I booked it at my school. It was like a wow moment for me. Showed up on set for Home Alone, saw what this world was like with lights, cameras, craft services. It just seemed like the dream world. I was like, wow. I was trying to recreate that feeling that I got from being in Home Alone. I'm doing woodwork right now. I never thought in a million years that I would be doing woodwork. I know Jesus was a carpenter, right? So it makes me feel like I'm doing something closer to home, closer to God. But I'm doing wood signs that have God's messages on them. My name is Diana Rein. I was born in Bucharest, Romania, and I came to the United States when I was 3 years old. I was always a very creative little girl. I loved music. I loved making my family laugh. I thought I was going to be a comedian at some point, but acting showed up. It also happened to be my parents' wedding anniversary when we arrived in America. And we only had $50 in our pockets. But you know what? I need to go back. Because as many might know, Romania was a communist country back in that day. And it was really difficult for us to leave. My aunt was a famous singer in Romania, so that's probably where I get my talent for music, and my dad was a professor of music, so it's on his side of the family. We went to church. We started going to church. It was a Romanian Orthodox church, and I was 3, and I had I had kid confidence, so I would go up to everybody in the church, and I would make friends with adults. And because I made friends with a wonderful couple, Stella and Tavi, and they became friends with my parents. They helped my mom get a job, and she worked at the Drake Hotel from that point for about 30 years. And then they got my dad a job as a janitor. He was a music professor in Romania. So he went from being a music professor to a janitor to help us, to help the family. And they just worked really, really, really hard. My grandparents were very, very religious, and I would take the CTA bus with them to church. It was about a half hour away. So when we were living in Chicago, I became more and more involved in the arts. And a lot of that had to do with my principal at a public school that I was going to saw that how much I loved, singing and acting and dancing. And he mentioned to my parents that there was a school in the city of Chicago that was a fine arts school. And not only did they teach subjects like reading, math, and all that, and science, but they taught dance and drama and piano, and went into 3rd grade into this new school, and it was my dream. I got to flourish there. And when I was 11, someone came to that school because they were looking for a child to narrate a book that was written by a child, and it was called The Snowman Who Wanted to See July. And so they picked me for that book. I narrated the book in a studio in Chicago, And the man that was producing it said, have you ever thought about acting? Like, have you ever thought about getting an agent? And my parents said, well, we don't know what that is. We're from Romania. We have no idea how you get into business. We thought it was just you had to know someone. And he said, well, I'm an actor and I can introduce you to an agency here in the city. So I went to the agency, I auditioned for them, and they started sending me out on acting auditions. And I booked Home Alone 1 and 2. They announced it over the intercom when I booked it at my school. It was like a wow moment for me, and showed up on set for Home Alone, saw what this world was like with lights, cameras, craft services. It just seemed like the dream world. I was like, wow. With the money I made from that movie, I was able to help my family, and I was able to, I guess the thought in my head was, if I keep going, I can really help my family out. And it made me grow up a little bit quickly, probably, but I thought that that was my destiny. And I wanted to move to California and the whole Hollywood dream. The place to go was Hollywood. And where was that? California. And that was fresh off of what happened with my aunt. So I honestly don't know how my parents just let me go. Like, if it was me, I would have been like, you're staying close to home. But my parents believed in what I was trying to do, and I applied to a college out there. I got accepted. I went into their BFA acting program. I would come home for, Christmas and the summer. But I just felt that it was my calling, I suppose, and I was very driven. I felt like it was my talent, and that's how I was going to, that was my purpose in this world and in this life. After 3 years, we couldn't afford the school anymore, so I left the school with 1 year to go. And I stayed out in Los Angeles, and I was trying to create something in the acting world, and I just felt like it was a huge struggle. All acting. I was trying to recreate that feeling that I got from being in Home Alone. I was trying to recreate it there, and it was just an uphill climb. It was not going anywhere. I was going on auditions. I was in this very dark Hollywood period of my life. I had boundaries. Like, there were things and opportunities that were not good. They were really shady. Thank God so much for that, because there were many opportunities to go completely off course. It was hard. There were a lot of hardships. There were some hard times with my sister that got sucked into that world. And I just felt really lost. And I was also going to bookshops a lot and reading about metaphysical stuff and the universe, metaphysics, quantum physics, crystals. It was everything but Christianity. Like, I was just in a completely different road. And I thought that that's what was right at the time, I guess, but it didn't feel right at all. I did not feel like I was going in the right direction. The direction I was going was not the right one, but I felt like since I had this ambition and to be successful in what culture deems as successful, I thought that's what it had to be, but it was a struggle the whole way. And after, how many years was that? 98. It was after about 5 years, I asked my parents to come and take me home. Right before I left California, my aunt's stepson contacted me. And this had been after almost 10 years. And I was very reluctant to talk to him, and I wasn't sure how my parents would feel about me talking to him again. I mean, it was no fault of his own, but it was just a little strained and a little, I didn't know how to operate or how to communicate with him. But I noticed that there was just a goodness in his soul, and he was talking a lot about Jesus. He was talking a lot about God. He was talking a lot about his church. He wanted to help my family. And I found out he was going to a Christian church, and there was just something about him that inspired me when I moved back to Chicago with my parents to seek out a Christian church. And I started going to the church. I was in the choir for a while. Things were going fine, but I ended up going to a birthday party for my friend in the city, and I met my now husband. After I got married, I convinced my husband to move to Los Angeles because I still had this unfulfilled dream. I was actually dreaming about driving in Los Angeles the whole time I was back in Chicago. It just felt like I was getting older and maybe I could get that second shot. Maybe I didn't do it right. Maybe I could, fulfill my dream still. So we moved to Los Angeles. And this whole time, even in our marriage, we just felt disconnected. We were both doing separate things. During this time, I was still trying to act, and I had written a short film that I filmed and produced and acted in, and it's called Gypsy Gift, and never put it out there, but that was the last thing I did before I had my son. And when I had my son, it was, wow, my whole life changed. My perspective didn't quite change though, because I still felt like I needed to succeed at something. I needed to be a role model for him. And that's when my music life took over. I decided that I wanted to do music. Do I want to continue acting, or do I want to do music? And I decided that I always wanted to play guitar like Stevie Ray Vaughan. When my son was a year old, to pursue music, and I really wanted to play blues and blues rock music. And I recorded an album while my mom was watching. We lived with my parents while my son was that young, and my mom would watch him for 3 hours, and I learned how to record music and mix music or edit music and stuff. So I made my own album. For the first time, I produced my own album. That one's called Long Road. That was made in 2015, and I released it in 2016 into the blues world. And I wasn't performing a lot other than locally. And I met a few different blues artists in the area, and I met a drummer that was playing with one of my favorite artists, and I asked him to produce my next album for me, and that was called Queen of My Castle. And that was very more traditional blues and blues rock. And that one got me signed to a record label, a blues label. So I was like, wow, thank you. Thank you, God. This is my dream. I finally reached what every musician's dream is, to get signed to a label. And I'm on this path now. I'm gonna tour. I'm gonna get a van. I'm gonna just win awards, and it's gonna be amazing. Well, I bought a van, got the label, bought a van, got a 5-week tour all planned out. And this was at the beginning of 2020, headed out on the road. Couldn't take my son. My son stayed with my parents. So it was me, my husband, my bass player, and my drummer. And we had 3 weeks. It was okay. It was fun. I met some really nice people on the road. I was crying every night because my son was not with me. The road life was not easy. I was super paranoid about everything because now as a mom, like I feel like I'm just more anxious about safety and stuff. And the third week, and we realized with all the news that's going on about COVID that we have to stop. So we ended up stopping, going all the way back home. I was in quarantine with my husband for 2 weeks, so I could see my son, but I didn't know who I came in contact with. I didn't want to jeopardize my parents' health. So we were in quarantine from my son and from them for about 2 weeks. And then he came back with us. And during this time, I was doing Facebook Lives with my music. So I still felt like there was momentum with the music. I was like, okay, I can keep doing this. But that didn't last really long. As soon as, you see the state of the world and you just feel this really strange, isolated feeling, you start questioning what things were like, what things are like. And I feel like that's the moment when the seeds started getting planted for my real relationship with God and Jesus. My mom had taught my son how to pray because I hadn't taught him how to pray yet. So my mom taught him how to pray while we were on tour. And I started reading the Bible. We started praying. Also at this time, my complete music identity was shattered because I didn't see a purpose. I wasn't willing to travel anymore. I wasn't willing to play at clubs anymore. So what does my life look like? And what am I doing? I just felt so listless, and I didn't play my guitar for a while. It was not full depression, but it was a pretty depressing time. I want my son to form his ear, and I want him to have, I want there to be a happy environment in our house, even if we can't do a lot of things. Out in the world right now, I want there to be a happy environment, and I bought a record player that has a radio. I remember the station that I wanted it on was the Christian station. I put it on that station, and that's what it was for months and months and months. And so I started learning the songs, and they were working on our hearts. Over time, we ended up going to a church together. And I just remember them announcing that the first time we were there, they were announcing that the baptism weekend was happening. And I remember praying and thinking to God and saying, I pray that all of us could get baptized together. My husband was never baptized, and he wasn't raised in a religious household. So it's just been amazing to see how God has worked in his life and on his heart too. It's completely changed us as a family. We have such a big foundation from going where we didn't feel like we were together or not together, but just on, we didn't have a good foundation. And to have God as our foundation, where we pray together as a family, where all of our decisions in our family life start with guidance from God, and knowing that we trust in God's guidance, no matter where we are. I mean, it's the biggest comfort to feel that. I feel like the time that we were alone and isolated during COVID times made me realize how important family is and how I wasn't serving my family right when I was striving so hard and just being selfish. It was going from a more selfish heart to a Jesus-driven heart. When I learned about the way that Jesus was with others and trying to be Jesus-like. The way I was living was not aligned with that at all. I know a lot of times people might say, like, the devil likes to come to you when you're isolated, but God does too. I've written a song called, my first Christian song called With Every Breath. The song is about being lost and feeling like you're lost in a wilderness. That's the first line.
Lost on my way in this wilderness, no paths lead to home. Far as I see, all is desolate, crying out as I roam. I call to you.
He's surprising me. Like, I'm doing woodwork right now. I never thought in a million years that I would be doing woodwork. I know Jesus was a carpenter, right? So it makes me feel like I'm doing something closer to home, closer to God. But I'm doing wood signs that have God's messages on them and verses on them. And that's my way of sharing God with other people. And it's something that they can, beautiful, that's of God, that they can have in their home. I'm also writing songs, like dedication songs, for people that they hire me to write songs for them for beautiful, happy occasions. And I know that it's fulfilling to someone's heart, or just bringing joy to somebody.
Your mercy will never abandon me, guiding me with every step. I call to you.
Just because I have him, my identity is in God now. My identity is in Christ. It's not in what movie I did or what song I did, but I do want to honor. I feel like he gave me a talent for a reason. I've always just led my life in a creative way, but it was more self-serving for quite a long time in my life, and now that's completely changed, where I'm taking the back seat and God's taking the front seat.
Problems, worries, sadness. Are you seeking solutions?
Bible says,
Do not be anxious about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Choose faith over fear.